see what this is about, man. Uh...
People began noticing a strange Instagram account that almost exclusively featured artistic photographs of human remains. If you know, you know. Skulls and bones available. DM to inquire. It seemed whoever was behind this account wasn't just photographing skulls, they were selling them. But what was the meaning behind the cryptic line, if you know, you know? Months later, the world would find out. A leaked video of unknown origin started to appear on social media feeds. It showed the inside of a house, filled with dead bodies. And then, all of a sudden, the Instagram account and leaked video disappeared from the internet. But thankfully, we had documented everything before it was lost forever. On November 7th, 2025, at 11:29 a.m., officers from the Eden Police Department were dispatched to the Mount Moriah Cemetery in Pennsylvania. As soon as they arrived, the scene immediately drew concern. The Hunter family mausoleum, previously sealed with cinder block and cement, had been forcibly opened. Inside, the marble floor had been broken apart, exposing the crypts nearly 10 feet below ground level. Among the debris, investigators found a screwdriver engraved multiple times with the name Brian. Also inside the mausoleum was a rope that suggested it had been used to descend into the exposed crypts.
Olipop has real ingredients with the classic root beer taste that takes you back.
4 down 4B.
One of those crypts belonged to Martha Hunter, a preteen who died in 1869. The marble stone sealing her resting place had been forcibly breached. Her remains, along with her clothing, were missing. Before police could determine who Brian was or why someone would steal the remains of a child buried more than a century earlier, they were called back to the cemetery. On November 29th, 2025, police were directed to Jonathan Pritchard Family Mausoleum. 5 of the 9 crypts inside had been robbed. However, this time, the perpetrator had left an empty can of Monster Energy, and the police were able to recover 2 partial fingerprints from it. Swabs were also taken from the can, as well as the Brian screwdriver for DNA samples. Whoever was doing this was expanding their grave robbing. It seemed like the age of the deceased didn't matter at all, only the remains themselves. It seemed the grave robber was getting sloppy already, though, leaving more and more clues for investigators. But would it be enough to catch them? However, the police were called again, this time about a robbery that had occurred weeks earlier. On November 6, 2025, at a cemetery on 1500 block of Westminster Road, Luzerne County, more than 100 miles from Mount Moriah, 2 sets of remains were stolen. The victims were Mary Capellina Paga, an 83-year-old woman who died in 1981, and Leo Terrence, a 53-year-old man who also died that same year. 2 cigarette butts and 2 energy drink cans were collected and sent for DNA analysis. Police were called on at least 3 more occasions in December, where they discovered that 49 sets of remains were taken from 9 different families' resting places in Mount Moriah Cemetery. The cemetery is split by the border of Eden and Philadelphia, and police eventually became aware of 10 additional family plots being burglarized in the Philadelphia section in the same manner as the robberies in the Eden section in the cemetery in Luzerne County. By the end of December, the total confirmed stolen bodies had reached 61. This number, however, does not include the 10 additional family plots that were burglarized, since the exact number of corpses taken from those sites remains unknown. Investigators noticed the same details repeated. Cigarette butts, empty energy drink cans, and in at least 2 mausoleums, police found broken wooden pallets propped up,
really doing this,
presumably
crazy.
used as makeshift ladders to climb in and out of underground vaults. The scale of the crimes raised a troubling concern. What would drive someone to go through the extremely difficult, dishonorable, and frankly disgusting work to exhume so many dead bodies? And what on earth could they possibly be doing with them?
What you want with
Barbara
that shit?
Kilmartin, who had family members buried at Mount Moriah, later said, "It's the last thing we can do for people is to honor their wishes and to not disturb them. I just can't understand why somebody would do that." Well, she was not alone in her confusion. But another question lingered. Why Mount Moriah? Established in 1855, the cemetery had long served as a final resting place for a wide range of Philadelphia's population. After the cemetery was abandoned by its owners, a volunteer group, Friends of Mount Moriah, was formed in 2011 to restore the grounds and preserve the site as a place of quiet remembrance. However, despite the volunteers' efforts, the cemetery is still quite run down. This could be why the grave robber was targeting Mount Moriah in particular. Due to its size, overground vegetation, and lack of consistent maintenance or monitoring, it's not hard to imagine why a person and their illicit actions would go unnoticed.
Grass-fed beef thyroid contains everything.
These ads be longer than a bit. God damn.
On November 7th, when members of the Friends of Mount Moriah contacted police after first noticing signs of disturbance at one of the mausoleums. As authorities continued to investigate, they received a tip. Look into Jonathan Gerlach for the Luzerne County Mausoleum robbery. I know someone who's friends with his family, and they mentioned that they recently discovered a partially decomposed corpse hanging in his basement, but were afraid to tell the police. Well, talk about a first lead. Police took it seriously and immediately started digging. Records showed that Jonathan Gerlach was charged on November 6, 2025 with shoplifting tools from a hardware store in East Earl Township, Lancaster County. Search warrants stated that the stolen items included a headlamp, a rechargeable LED glow stick, a hammer drill bit, medium-sized work gloves, and a metal cutting wheel with a combined value of $167.43. Investigators noted that during the same visit to the hardware store, Gerlach paid for more than $250 worth of other merchandise. Court documents emphasize that the items he did not pay for were tools commonly associated with burglaries. He may have believed that stealing the tools would help him avoid detection, but instead it backfired and only drew further attention to his actions and raised suspicion. The tipster also directed investigators to Gerlach's Instagram account. What they found raised further concern. Of the 147 posts on the account, only 2 showed Gerlach himself. The rest depicted human and animal remains. In his most recent post, dated January 5th, 2026, he wrote, "If you know, you know. Skulls/bones available. DM to inquire," followed by a pointer finger emoji and, quote, "From my personal gallery." An earlier post from October 1st, 2024 contained just one word: sold. As police reviewed the account more closely, some of the most disturbing posts appeared to involve the remains of a child. In one post, Gerlach wrote, "This precious little one, just 3 or 4 years old, has recently come under my guardianship to be honored and preserved. She will find a place in my private collection, where she will be housed with the utmost respect." Nothing further was said about who the child was or where the remains came from. Was this skull from one of the multiple children's corpses stolen from Mount Moriah? If so, does supposedly restoring and handling them with care justify removing them from their resting place? Is it even possible for this child's remains to be honored and housed with the utmost respect if her caretaker is the same person who took her from her home in the first place? While Gerlach claimed to keep some remains for his personal collection, others were allegedly sold, like the remains of a 6-month-old infant, as well as those of a 3 or 4-year-old child, whose skull was modified into an exploding head. Dozens of other posts featured remains identified only as young adults or older
That's
individuals.
crazy.
The account also displayed
How long he was getting away with this shit for? This shit got like
leopards
200
and
likes.
Other wild cats appeared
148
throughout the feed.
likes.
Some were listed as sold. One example, a Bengal tiger posted on March 20th, 2024, was marked as sold for $2,000. In the caption,
Damn, he was making crazy money off
as
shit like this.
ethically sourced/acquired. That same phrasing appears repeatedly in the earlier days of his account, applied not only to animal remains, but to
Who's
human
buying these shits? What the fuck?
ones as well, such as in one post dated March 18th, 2024, where he shows a skull of a woman he claims was middle-aged and ends with the statement, "As always, ethically sourced/acquired, not for sale." However, in his later posts, specifically from the period when the grave robbing was taking place, his assurances of the remains being ethically sourced are notably missing. He also appears to be showcasing less remains that he's keeping for his personal
Right? Someone asked him, saying, who the buying jail for everyone? Oh, God. He sold someone's family member. That's sick, man.
and is more focused on selling them. But, okay, what does ethically sourced even mean? And is there really a legal market for the sale of human remains? Well, surprisingly,
For sure,
yes.
I believe that.
In recent years, human bones and modified remains have become increasingly visible on social media. The market includes a range of buyers, from collectors of curiosities to ritual practitioners. A smaller number of contemporary artists and designers incorporate human remains into sculptures or installations. Medical and dental students have also historically sought real skulls for study. There are, however, strict differences between legal anatomical preparation and illicit removal. In 2016, National Geographic reported that Skulls Unlimited was the only company in the United States legally processing donor skulls obtained directly through body donation programs. That company only sells donor skulls to verified professionals, including doctors, dentists, anthropologists, and others with legitimate scientific or medical needs. Skulls from the 18th, 19th, or early 20th century, which qualify as antique skulls, may be sold to the general public. At the federal level, there is no single U.S. law prohibiting the sale of human remains, with the exception of certain states and strict protections for Native American remains. As a result, collectors do not generally need credentials to buy or sell human skulls already on the market. So, the owning and trade of human remains is not illegal. What matters is how they were originally acquired from the deceased.
This is sick.
Grave robbing itself is not new. For centuries, graves were disturbed to steal valuables buried with the dead. Body snatching, however, emerged as a more specific practice tied to the rise of modern medicine. By the late 18th century, advances in medical training and the growth of medical schools had created a shortage of legally available bodies for dissection. This led to the rise of resurrectionists, individuals who exhumed the recently dead and sold the bodies to medical institutions. At the time, British law did not recognize buried bodies as property, allowing the practice to continue until legislation in 1832 reduced widespread grave robbing. However, the demand persisted. Over time, India became a major supplier of human bones for Western medical study, driven by economic hardship and limited burial options. That trade ended in 1985 when the sale of more than 1,500 child skeletons was uncovered, prompting India to ban the export of human remains. While many remains in circulation today originated as donated anatomical specimens, the renewed demand for human bones has coincided with a renewal in grave robbing. Because anybody can sell human remains, it is difficult to determine what has been ethically sourced, but still there is a way. Donated anatomical specimens often show signs of preparation, such as drilled holes, varnish, or metal fittings. Remains taken directly from graves, by contrast, may exhibit soil staining, root etching, microfractures from long-term burial, or fragments of coffin wood, nails, or fabric still attached. Individually, these indicators are not definitive. Taken together, they help distinguish between remains prepared for study and those removed illegally from the ground. For example, Jonathan Gerlach's post from July 22, 2025, shows a human skull in which he draws particular attention to remaining nasal hair, neck hair, facial hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, and fine vellus hair. Another post from August 22, 2025, shows a skull with remnants of the eyes still present in the orbital sockets, visible hair on the skull itself, and signs of decomposition consistent with being buried in the ground. By contrast, legally obtained skulls from Skulls Unlimited typically show clear medical preparation with clean surfaces and an overall consistent, standardized look. However, even if we ethically source the remains, what is the morality of having a skull in your living room as decoration? As Jonathan Gerlach's story gained traction, so did his Instagram. And in one post dated November 6, 2023, a user wrote, "Not gonna lie, these pictures are beautiful. Thing is, these are remains of humans who have likely been dead for hundreds of years. Not saying it makes it right, but if I had been dead for so long that the world and any potential living relatives had long since gone themselves, I wouldn't be offended if some dude dug me up and took a few cool photos before dispersing my remains all over the place to people who love and appreciate that sort of thing. People might be grossed out, but there are others online who sell human bones."
That's fucking
This
sick.
comment brings up an argument, certainly, but if we're to take this comment seriously, the user here is describing a personal belief, one in which they would consent to being exhumed, artistically photographed, and sold for profit after death. But here's the thing, not everyone would.
Get Ultra delivered.
Think you're all...
Across cultures, and even within the same culture, death is viewed differently. People have different beliefs on the sanctity of remains, as well as different wishes for what should and shouldn't be done to the remains after they die. Just because there are living people who do not believe remains are sacred and don't care what happens to their body after they die, doesn't mean that those people should be able to decide what happens to the dead bodies of people who do care. What people choose to do with their bodies after death is their choice, and so far as it is possible, these wishes should be honored. Even when they can't, we should be mindful of a certain glorification of death and show respect for the life that came before. None of which can be said about Jonathan's alleged actions. Breaking into crypts and stealing bodies is not what would qualify as being respectful of people's wishes. Even when there aren't any living relatives of that person, if they were laid to rest in a cemetery, then we can assume that they didn't consent to being harvested for bones to be sold on Instagram. Now, you might be wondering, Brew, why are you spending so much time discussing the morality of Jonathan's grave robbing? It's obviously bad, but you'd be surprised to see how many have defended him online, saying that what he did isn't that bad. So we thought we should try to lay out the reasons why what he did is, in fact, that bad. But at this point in the investigation, Jonathan Gerlach was still at large, free to desecrate the dead as he pleased. As police continued digging into his activities, another detail began to stand out. Among the followers on his Instagram account was a man named Brian, spelled the same way as the name repeatedly etched into the screwdriver recovered at one of the ransacked mausoleums. According to search warrants, the person who had originally contacted them about Jonathan also told police that Brian had disappeared for several days in November and later mentioned he had been in Chicago selling a human skull. Did this mean Jonathan Gerlach hadn't been acting alone? The same day they received the tip, investigators began tracking Gerlach's movements. On December 23rd, Eden police conducted a license plate reader search on Gerlach's Toyota RAV4. Records showed the vehicle had traveled into or near the areas where bodies were stolen on at least 5 occasions between November 2nd and December 17th, the same window of time when the thefts occurred. Court documents also stated that cell phone records placed him in those same areas at the same times. On December 23rd, a Yeadon officer on patrol at Mount Moriah noticed a Toyota RAV4 parked between 2 fallen tree limbs inside the cemetery. Police believed the positioning was intentional, meant to conceal the vehicle. No one was inside, but multiple energy drink cans were visible on the front passenger seat. Later that evening, officers went to Gerlach's residence in Ephrata and saw the same vehicle parked outside. On January 6th, detectives patrolling Mount Moriah again found Gerlach's Toyota parked near the cemetery. This time, police reported seeing human skulls and bones in the back seat. Gerlach was arrested shortly afterward when they observed him walking back toward the vehicle, carrying a crowbar and a burlap sack containing a child's mummified remains. That same day, police executed a search warrant at Gerlach's home. Inside, they reported finding over 100 human skulls, numerous human long bones, mummified human feet and hands, 2 decomposing human torsos, and other assorted skeletal items. Not long after, an alleged leaked video from inside his house surfaced.
Oh, I gotta find that shit.
It's like my grandmother's dentures.
It is. It's f***ing gross. Look at the one hanging.
Oh my god. Oh, this is a couple.
Look at these ones. All the ones behind you. God damn.
Oh, that one's still alive.
That's not long. It's all 5.
Well, you
Hold on, I want to get the hand.
know. Wow, look at this.
You spell this nigga's name?
I'm sorry. Oh my god.
What the fuck? Is that a pacemaker?
While we couldn't confirm the origin of the video, several details suggested it may be authentic. At the 21-second mark, one of the people visible in the footage appears to be wearing a firearm in a holster, indicating they were likely police. Earlier in the clip, between 9 seconds and 11 seconds, a couch is visible that closely resembles the fabric and design seen in the background of Gerlach's skull photographs. It is possible the couch or a similar piece of furniture was used as backdrop for those images. Another detail drew particular attention online. A Reddit user known as CardioTechie pointed out a visible pacemaker in the footage, writing, "The pacemaker detail makes me think it's real. That is definitely a real pacemaker design. Looks like a Medtronic or a Boston Scientific. That specific set of remains will be able to be identified at least." A second user, LividMoose553, noted that the video was edited. According to their observation, the opening seconds show a storage unit, while the remainder of the footage appears to be filmed inside a basement. Whatever the origin of the video, it offered a disturbing glimpse of what Jonathan Gerlach's basement may have contained. According to authorities, Gerlach later admitted to stealing approximately 30 sets of human remains from Mount Moriah and described how he accessed the burial sites. On January 7th, 2026, District Attorney Tanner Rouse spoke at a press conference regarding the case.
It is truly, in the most literal sense of the word, horrific.
It's easy for the screen to steal our time. Less can free you to find more.
Can't see his Instagram.
I grieve for those who are upset by this, who are going through it, who are trying to figure out if it is in fact their loved one or their child, because we found remains that we believe to be months-old infants among those that he had collected.
When Chief of Edinburgh Police, Henry Gianmarco, was asked if he had ever seen something similar, he replied,
No. After 30 years now, I can say this is probably the most horrific thing that I've seen. And again, to the families, as the district attorney pointed out, we all have loved ones that passed. Like, rest in peace is rest in peace. And this is definitely something that
I can't find it. It's a new account, but
as
That's
he
just not
pointed
his.
out, an infant. Having children and grandchildren, yeah, it was definitely an event.
Jonathan Gerlach was ultimately charged with 489 criminal counts, including 100 counts of corpse abuse. Additional charges include theft, burglary, intentional desecration of venerated objects, trespassing, criminal mischief, receiving stolen property, and desecration of historic burial sites. He was held in custody in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, on a $1 million bail, and was scheduled to appear at a preliminary hearing on January 20th. While there were no further developments regarding Brian, whose name was etched into a screwdriver found at one of the sites, District Attorney Tanner Rouse addressed the matter at a press conference. As of January 2026, Rouse stated that authorities did not believe Gerlach was working with anyone and that no additional arrest warrants have been issued. Beyond the charges and court dates, this case leaves behind a deeper question. Death is an unavoidable part of life, but where is the line between embracing it and romanticizing it? Behind every set of remains was once a person who lived, made choices, and entrusted their body to the earth, their loved ones, or in some case, to science. Regardless of the circumstances, human remains laid to rest are not meant to be collected for decor or profit. Because
You can't do
it is not
nothing
only
in
the
this
dead
world. There's
who
always
are
some
wronged, but
stupid
the
shit
living
going
who
on. Somebody
trust that
doing
their
something.
final wishes will be respected.
Right.
If you'd like to help us get the algorithm to notice this video, then hit